Standing under the brilliant morning sun in the high-ceiling glass lobby of the architectural firm she had built from scratch, Genevieve Prescott watched in frozen disbelief as her husband, Harrison Vance, casually handed her master design portfolio, 5 years of her relentless devotion, artistic soul, and architectural brilliance, to his young assistant and mistress, Giselle Drake, announcing to the entire executive board that Giselle was the sole creative genius behind the multi-million-dollar project. When Genevieve's voice trembled with heartbreak as she confronted him in front of the sunlit room, Harrison simply laughed in her face, mocking her pain as pathetic female jealousy and declaring that she was washed up, hysterical, and no longer needed in the empire she had sacrificed her entire youth to build. Before we continue with this powerful story of resilience, self-discovery, and reclaiming one's rightful legacy, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel to join our growing family. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling and Vance architecture had always felt like a sanctuary to Genevieve, a luminous proof of what dedicated craftsmanship could achieve. For 12 years, she had given every waking hour of her daylight to constructing a legacy that began as a humble dream in her late father's dusty woodwork shop. Her father, Julian Prescott, had been a master draftsman who taught her that true architecture was not merely steel and glass, but an act of love designed to gather light into human lives. When she met Harrison Vance fresh out of university, he was a charming man with boundless ambition but limited creative vision. Intoxicated by his grand promises and her own trusting heart, Genevieve had married him, investing her entire financial inheritance and her father's cherished design catalogs into launching their firm. She worked behind the scenes in the sunlit drafting rooms from dawn until dusk, sketching blueprints, calculating load-bearing ratios, and sculpting iconographic structures that transformed the city skyline, while Harrison assumed the role of public face and chief executive. Over the years, out of deep marital devotion and quiet humility, she allowed him to sign his name alongside hers on every prestigious tender, never imagining that the man she loved was systematically rewriting history to obscure her existence entirely. The true cruelty of Harrison's betrayal revealed itself gradually under the harsh clarity of daytime reality. As the firm grew into a commercial powerhouse occupying 3 sun-drenched floors in the city's financial district, Harrison's demeanor shifted from appreciative partner to arrogant tyrant. He began surrounding himself with sycophants, key among them Giselle Drake, a newly hired marketing consultant whose talent lay not in design, but in ruthless ambition and manipulative charm. Genevieve had initially welcomed Giselle into the company, mentoring her during morning orientation sessions and sharing her creative philosophies. However, Genevieve soon began noticing subtle changes in Harrison's behavior: secret daylight lunches, hushed phone calls in the office hallways, and a dismissive coldness whenever Genevieve spoke about structural modifications for their crowning venture, the Horizon Heights Urban Sanctuary. On that fateful morning, Genevieve had walked into the executive boardroom carrying the finalized structural renderings, only to find Harrison standing beside Giselle, presenting Genevieve's signature concept sketches under Giselle's name. When Genevieve stepped forward, her hands shaking as she pulled out the original hand-penciled vellum sheets bearing her own monogram, Harrison did not even flinch. Instead, he smiled condescendingly, placed an arm around Giselle's shoulders, and announced to the assembled investors that Genevieve's emotional stability had deteriorated, claiming she was suffering from paranoid delusions driven by unprovoked spousal jealousy. Before the daylight had even reached its afternoon peak, Genevieve found herself standing on the concrete pavement outside the towering glass skyscraper she had designed, holding a single cardboard box containing her personal drafting pens, a framed photograph of her late father, and her worn leather-bound sketchbook. Harrison had used legal loopholes embedded in corporate restructurings she had signed years ago out of unconditional trust to sever her employment, revoke her security clearance, and freeze her access to the firm's main bank accounts. As executive board members looked down from the sunlit upper windows, Harrison had instructed security guards to escort her out of the building, treating the true creator of the firm like a common trespasser. Standing in the bright, unforgiving glare of the midday sun, Genevieve felt an overwhelming wave of humiliation and sorrow wash over her. The man who had pledged to cherish her had stolen her life's work, handed it to his mistress, and mocked her agony as mere petty jealousy. Yet, as she looked up at the gleaming facade reflective of the clear sky, a quiet, resolute flame sparked beneath her heartbreak. She realized that while Harrison had stolen her physical blueprints, he could never steal the mind and spirit that had conceived them. Seeking refuge from the public noise, Genevieve drove out to the rolling green countryside on the outskirts of the valley, where her father's old carpentry workshop sat drenched in afternoon sunlight. The wooden building had been neglected for years, its rustic rafters covered in golden dust and wild ivy clinging to the wide barn windows. Kneeling on the weathered timber floor in the warm daylight, Genevieve wept openly, releasing years of accumulated grief, suppressed exhaustion, and the profound pain of betrayal. For days, she struggled to find her footing, rising with the morning sun only to feel the crushing weight of isolation and self-doubt. The city news outlets were dominated by press releases from Vance Enterprises, featuring bright daytime photos of Harrison and Giselle celebrating the launch of Horizon Heights. Giselle was praised as a prodigy of modern design, while Harrison was lauded as a visionary entrepreneur. Friends from her former social circle quietly distanced themselves, unwilling to cross Harrison's political influence. In those quiet, sun-filled hours inside the wooden workshop, Genevieve confronted the painful realization that she had allowed her own identity to be subsumed by a man who valued image over integrity, leaving her to question whether she had the strength to rebuild from absolute zero. Restoration began on a clear, crisp morning when an unexpected guest arrived at the workshop. Leland Thorne, a respected structural engineer and historical preservation specialist who had been a loyal friend of her late father, walked through the open barn doors under the bright morning sky. Leland had seen the morning newspapers and immediately recognized Genevieve's distinctive design language in the published Horizon Heights renderings. Sitting together at an old pine table illuminated by morning sunlight, Leland listened with quiet empathy as Genevieve shared the full extent of Harrison's treachery. Leland did not offer patronizing pity. Instead, he placed an old brass drafting compass on the table and reminded her of her father's core belief, that a building's true strength is tested not during calm weather, but when storms attempt to shake its foundation. Leland revealed that the municipal government had just announced an open, anonymous daylight design competition for the Grand Metropolitan Civic Renewal Project, the largest public infrastructure contract in the region's history, aimed at constructing a revolutionary, sunlight harvesting community center and public library. Leland offered to partner with her, supplying his engineering firm's technical backing if she would summon the courage to pick up her pencils once again. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, Genevieve threw herself into her work, transforming the sun-drenched wooden workshop into an active design studio. Every morning as the valley filled with golden light, she worked alongside Leland, sketching sweeping curves, calculating complex thermal dynamics, and sculpting a masterpiece of sustainable architecture dubbed the Solarium Sanctuary. Working with Leland was a revelation for Genevieve. Unlike Harrison, who had constantly minimized her ideas to elevate his own ego, Leland treated her with profound intellectual respect, validating her creative instinct and challenging her to push boundaries. As the weeks passed under the clear sky, Genevieve felt her spirit healing. She began to see that her worth was not defined by Harrison's betrayal or Giselle's stolen glory. Through intense daylight hours of collaboration, a deep, respectful bond blossomed between Genevieve and Leland, built on shared values, honest communication, and mutual dedication to authentic craftsmanship. Meanwhile, back in the city's financial core, cracks were beginning to show in Harrison's stolen empire. As the Horizon Heights project transitioned into its complex structural engineering phase, Giselle's complete lack of genuine architectural training became a catastrophic liability. During morning site inspections and daylight technical reviews with city regulators, Giselle was unable to answer basic questions regarding load ratios, daylight diffusion angles, or structural steel reinforcements. Harrison, growing increasingly desperate as construction deadlines loomed under the bright afternoon sun, realized that without Genevieve's technical genius, the blueprints were an unworkable shell. Refusing to admit defeat publicly, Harrison tracked Genevieve down to her father's valley workshop on a bright Tuesday afternoon. Arriving in his luxury vehicle, Harrison stepped into the sunlit timber barn, offering Genevieve a lucrative contract to secretly serve as Giselle's ghost designer, arrogantly believing that financial compensation and a condescending apology would entice her back into his shadow. Standing in the warm daylight of her father's sanctuary, Genevieve looked at Harrison not with hatred, but with a profound clarity that surprised even herself. Harrison attempted to brush off his past cruelty, claiming that business required tough decisions and that her refusal to help would destroy the legacy they had supposedly built together. Genevieve calmly looked him in the eye and refused his offer entirely, stating that her mind, her honor, and her dignity were no longer for sale at any price. Furious at her defiance, Harrison warned her that he would use his wealth to blackball her from the industry forever, promising that no review board would ever take a disgraced, independent designer over Vance Enterprises. As he drove away into the bright glare of the afternoon sun, Genevieve felt no fear, only an unshakable determination to let her work speak for itself at the upcoming public competition hearing. The turning point arrived on a brilliant Friday morning at the Grand City Hall Auditorium, where the Municipal Selection Committee convened to evaluate the final proposals for the Civic Renewal Project. The sunlit auditorium was filled with industry leaders, journalists, and city officials. Harrison and Giselle arrived surrounded by a public relations team, confident that their wealth and slick corporate presentation would secure the contract. Giselle took the stage first under the bright daylight stage lights, presenting a flashy, superficial design that Vance Enterprises had hastily assembled from Genevieve's old discarded archive files. However, during the open question period, the city's chief structural engineer pressed Giselle on the building's daylight thermal regulation and structural safety metrics. Giselle faltered, offering vague, contradictory answers that left the panel looking concerned. Seeing his presentation failing, Harrison stepped up to intervene, but his aggressive corporate rhetoric only deepened the committee's skepticism regarding the project's technical viability. It was then that Genevieve and Leland stepped up to the sunlit podium to present the solarium sanctuary. Dressed in a simple, elegant ivory suit that caught the morning light, Genevieve spoke with calm authority, guiding the committee through a breathtaking, fully realized architectural masterpiece that harmonized natural sunlight, environmental sustainability, and human connection. Her presentation was so masterfully detailed and deeply felt that the entire auditorium sat in rapt silence. But Genevieve did not stop at presenting her new vision. With the permission of the panel, she displayed physical evidence that brought the room to a standstill: original, watermarked vellum drafts dated 5 years prior, stamped with her father's unique compass seal and her own notarized signature, demonstrating beyond doubt that the core structural innovation presented in Vance Enterprises' Horizon Heights project was identical to her stolen intellectual property. The evidence was indisputable under the clear light of day. Harrison and Giselle had systematically plagiarized her work and misrepresented it to investors and the public. The fallout was swift and decisive under the bright glare of public scrutiny. The municipal board unanimously awarded the landmark civic renewal contract to Genevieve and Leland's firm, while launching an immediate formal ethics investigation into Vance Enterprises. Within days, major financial backers pulled their funding from Horizon Heights, causing Vance Enterprises stock to plummet during morning trading. The company board convened an emergency daylight meeting, voting overwhelmingly to strip Harrison of his executive authority and terminate Giselle's employment immediately. Facing severe legal liabilities, financial collapse, and public disgrace, Harrison's facade crumbled completely. Giselle, seeing that Harrison's fortune and status had vanished, promptly left him, leaving Harrison alone in his empty, sunlit office to face the consequences of his arrogance and greed. In the weeks that followed, Genevieve reclaimed the corporate headquarters, removing Harrison's name from the glass entrance in broad daylight and establishing Prescott and Thorne architecture. Yet, despite her decisive victory, Genevieve chose not to consume her heart with vengeance. When Harrison faced personal bankruptcy, Genevieve agreed to a fair legal settlement that allowed him to settle his debts without being completely destroyed, granting him the opportunity to reflect on his actions and rebuild his life honestly. She recognized that holding on to bitterness would only keep her tied to the past, whereas true freedom lay in forgiveness, personal growth, and walking forward with grace. Under her leadership, the firm flourished, becoming a beacon of integrity, mentorship, and brilliant design that transformed the city for the better. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. What do you think is the greatest strength a person can show when faced with betrayal? Is it the courage to stand up and reclaim what is theirs, or the grace to forgive and walk away with a clean heart? Please leave your meaningful thoughts and reflections in the comments section below. On a glorious, sun-drenched afternoon several months later, Genevieve stood in the completed glass courtyard of the solarium sanctuary during its grand opening ceremony. Golden sunlight poured through the soaring glass canopy, illuminating the smiling faces of families, children, and community members gathered to celebrate the new space. Beside her stood Leland, his eyes filled with warmth and deep respect as they watched their shared dream come to life under the clear sky. Looking out at the radiant sanctuary she had crafted from her own pain and perseverance, Genevieve smiled with profound peace, knowing that she had not only taken back the empire she built, but had discovered an inner strength that no betrayal could ever extinguish.